So let's look at example 2. Step 1 says we need to get all of our x's by itself and then get all of our y's by itself. So in this problem, or not all of our y's, I'm sorry, we need to get all of our x's by itself and then all the constants on the other side of the equal sign. So right now, we have an x squared on one side and a 12x on the other side of the equal sign. So my first step is going to be to subtract 12x over, and that's going to leave me with x squared minus 12x, and then equals negative 20. And so what I just did here, I'm going to label this with a 1 because I just completed step 1 of this process. Step 2 of this process says to, as needed, divide both sides by a to make the leading coefficient of x squared 1. Well, the number in front of x squared is already 1, so I don't need to complete step 2. Step 3 says complete the square by adding b over 2 squared to both sides of the equation. So I'm going to do my calculation of b over 2 squared kind of off to the side here. My value of b is what's attached to x in this last line of work, so negative 12. So the work I'm going to do is negative 12 divided by 2 squared. That's negative 6 squared, which is 36. So I'm going to take this value of 36 and I'm going to add it to both sides of my equation. And again, what I'm going through now is step 3. So I added this 36 to both sides because what I've done is I've created a quadratic function on the left side that I know is going to factor into a very specific way of a binomial being squared, which is exactly what we did in example 1. Just now we have an equal sign and some other numbers on the right side of this. So step 4 is to factor. So because I've set up this quadratic function to be x squared minus 12x plus 36 on the left side, I know it's going to factor to be x minus 6. And that minus 6 is coming from the fact that half of negative 12 is negative 6. And again, that's step 4. Negative 20 plus 36 is 16. So I factored x squared minus 12x plus 36 into x minus 6 squared, and I've simplified the right side to be negative 20 plus 36, and that is 16. Step 5 in our process is starting to solve for x. The way we get rid of power of 2's is we square root. So that's why step 5 says to square root both sides of your equal sign. That's going to give us x minus 6 equals square root of 16. We have to do plus or minus 4 here because we're dealing with solving for a variable, and a positive or a negative 4 when squared would both equal a positive 16. Step 6 in our list of steps is to get the x all by itself. So I'm going to add 6 over. So I'm going to end up with actually 2 answers here. I'm going to get a positive 4 plus 6, which is 10. And then I'm going to get a negative 4 plus 6, which is 2. So my 2 answers are 10 and 2. So I know that this is a little bit of a lengthy process, but for those of you that really like steps and procedures, this might be something that you favor. All right, I want you to try example 3, pause the video, see how far you get, and then press play to hear me walk you through it. So in this problem, we don't need to complete step 1 because all of our x terms are on one side and non-x terms are on the other side of the equal sign, but I do need to do some rearranging. So I'm going to rewrite this with the x squared term first, then the 18x, and equals 45. Step 2 is to make sure that our leading coefficient a is 1. And in this case, it's not, it's 3. So that means I need to divide everything by 3 to give me x squared plus 6x equals 15. Step 3 is to figure out what b over 2 squared is and add it to both sides. So I'm going to do that work over here. My value of b is 6. It's the number in front of x. Half of 6 is 3. And when I square that, I get 9. So what that means for me is I'm going to add 9 to both sides of my equal sign. So I'm creating this perfect square quadratic function on the left side that is then going to factor in a very specific way when I go to do step 4. It's going to factor into x plus 3 because positive 3 is half of that b value. 15 plus 9 is 24. After that, step 5 is to square root both sides. Leaving me with x plus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 24. And step 6 is to isolate the x. So when I subtract the 3 over, I'm going to get negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 24. Now, one thing that we've not talked about yet is simplifying our radicals or simplifying the square root. And that square root of 24 can be simplified. It can be broken into, let's see here, 4 and 6. Square root of 4 is 2. Square root of 6 cannot be simplified, so it's going to just stay as is. So our final answer in simplest form is negative 3 plus or minus 2 root 6. And that wraps up example 3. Example 4 is another try on your own. See if you can make it even further through this problem than you did through the last one. So pause the video, press play when you're ready to see me go through it. All right, so first things first, we need to go through and apply step 2. We don't need to worry about applying step 1 because all of our x terms are on one side and non-x terms are on the other. But step 2 says we need to get our value of a to be 1, so I need to divide everything by the leading coefficient. Getting me x squared minus 8x equals 9 here. The next step is I need to take my value of b, which is negative 8, divide it by 2 and square it. Well, that's negative 4 squared, or in other words, 16. And what that says is I need to take 16 and add that to both sides of my equation. What that's allowing me to do now is to actually go through and factor this quadratic function I have on the left side. That is going to factor to be x minus 4 squared, and 9 plus 16 is 25. Square rooting both sides. I get x minus 4 equals plus or minus 5. And the very last step, adding the 4 over, I get a positive 5 plus 4, which is 9. And then I get a negative 5 plus 4, which is negative 1. So my two answers are 9 and negative 1. So the very last thing we're going to learn about today is to go from standard form back to vertex form using a little bit of this process of completing the square. So let's take a look at example 5. We have x squared plus 16x minus 12. Before I start this problem, I'm going to rearrange it so that my f of x, which is really y, is going to be on the right side versus the left side. Now I'm going to focus on step 1 of the completing the square process and make sure that my x squared and x terms are the only thing on the left side and all the other pieces are on the right side. So to do that, I'm going to add 12 over. I don't need to worry about step 2 because my value of my value of a is already 1. To do step 3, I need to take my value of b, which is 16, divide by 2 and square it. Well, that's 4 squared, which is 16. So I'm going to add 16 to both sides. Oh wait, no, 16 divided by 2 is 8, and 8 squared is 64. I'm sorry. Step 4 now is to factor. So this will factor to be x plus 8 squared equals, and then simplifying over here, 12 plus 64 is 76. Now normally we would go through and continue solving for x, but the goal is not to solve for x. The goal is to put this in vertex form. So what I need to do next is I'm going to break away from my completing the square process, and I'm going to resolve this for f of x. So I need to get rid of the 76, and I'm going to subtract it over. That'll leave me with x plus 8 quantity squared minus 76 equals f of x. So if I were to rewrite this in a way that's a little bit more familiar to us, I have f of x equals x plus 8 squared minus 76. Using our knowledge from the first lesson we ever learned with vertex form, I know then that my vertex is at the coordinate of -8, -76, coming from the numbers inside and outside of your grouping symbol. So that wraps up the 7, I don't know why I keep thinking we're in Unit 7. That wraps up the 2.4 lesson. Please let me know or Mr. Brasser know if you have any questions. Thank you so much.